Good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending today's session. First of all, I'd like to say thank you very much to Kaplan Early Learning for being a sponsor of the 2023 Smart Start Conference. We were so excited and very honored to have them back in person with us this year. And I must say that we had a very great conference. I hope some of you were able to attend and that you enjoyed it. And thank you for joining us in today's session. We have with us today Dr. Laura Wilhelm, and she is with Kaplan Early Learning. And her session today is on COVID Stole My Toddlerhood, Building Back Missed Language and Social Skills. So again, thank you for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the session.
All right, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. All right, so I am Laura Wilhelm. I'll do a quick introduction, kind of me by the numbers. In the picture, you can see my pre-COVID hair. Did anyone else grow hair during COVID when you couldn't get to the barber, hairstylist? What else are we gonna do? Grow our hair out. All right, so I love working with young children, especially 2-year-olds. I started working in childcare in 1981. Don't tell me what year you were born, it will just make me sad. I started in public schools in 88, and then for 25 years, I was a professor and a lab school director. I was a national validator for NAEYC accredited programs and a CAPE site visitor for university early childhood programs. Now I have the privilege of serving as Vice President for Professional Learning at Kaplan Early Learning. I have, the slide's a little bit old. It talks about my 3rd book coming out from Griffin House, and that was in 2021. I now have my 4th book coming out next year in 2024, and that one is called Living Loose Parts, Creatures of Curiosity. The previous one was Enticing Environments for Infants and Toddlers. Before that, there was a loose parts book for infants and toddlers called Treasure Baskets. And before that, I was part of a study my friend did looking at child neglect and the teacher's role, because what they found was in most cases, a majority of cases of maltreatment, there was neglect present, and yet neglect really is the neglected part of child maltreatment. There's less about it in the literature, there's less about what we can do as teachers, and yet we do have a significant role to play. So anyway, those are the books, and I do still have 2 kids. They're only one's a teenager now, also getting older, and I do still have a dog who's always ready to go for a walk. So that tells you a little bit about who I am. But now we're going to look at my great nephew, Nelson. This was during the pandemic, and he's just playing with his mother's mask. It's not actually his. I know you're thinking, that mask doesn't fit very well. But we're going to think about children during the pandemic, and then later we'll see Nelson again and see how he's doing now. All right, so my question for you for our waterfall that I promised, do you think working with young children is A, the same as it was before the COVID-19 pandemic, or B, a whole new ballgame? So your choices are A or B, and I want you to type it into your chat, but don't hit enter yet. And then we're going to give everybody just a minute, and then we'll all hit enter at once so that it waterfalls and we can see. And either answer is fine. No, neither one is better than the other. But in your experience, do you think mostly the same as before pandemic or a whole new ball game? A or B? Are you ready? Okay, let's waterfall. Okay, so we've got some A's, we've got a lot of B's, B and A. Some things never change, right? Lots of B's, B and A. Okay, all right. Well, we're going to look at some studies, and I don't think you're going to find anything surprising except that we're starting to get studies to come out, which is good because we need to look at what's happening. But before we start on that, I want you to just close your eyes for a moment And imagine that you were born into a pandemic like COVID-19, a moment in our history. As a baby, you might have trouble understanding the sounds of language because the lower half of people's faces has been covered with a cloth or an electrostatic non-woven propylene fiber. I had to look that up. I'm glad now I know what those N95 masks are made of. The adults who love you may also be feeling overwhelmed by global uncertainty, trying to do their jobs remotely. They might lose their jobs entirely, all while struggling to care for you and keep your older brothers and sisters busy, maybe with remote school, maybe even having a few cousins or neighbor kids in, trying to get them to do their remote school, while worrying about elderly relatives. What could possibly go wrong? A lot, right? And as we know from the ACEs study, we may not even know for a while what else has gone wrong, or how that's going to impact our sense of self, children's sense of self, and their long-term health. So today, in our session, COVID Stole My Toddlerhood, we're going to look at 3 studies, groups of studies. One is looking at children themselves and their storytelling. Another one is the social and emotional toll that the pandemic has taken and is taking on caregivers and children. And then the hopeful part at the end, we're going to look at studies of risk and resilience. So we're going to do a breakout real quick. And I'm going to ask you in your breakout, what changes are you noticing in young children since the pandemic? And then find a Bob, a leader of your group, a breakout boss, that's Bob, to report back to us. So I'm going to do, let's see, probably 4 or 5 people in a group. And for your boss, choose the person with the brightest color shirt on today. And okay, are you ready? What are you going to talk about in your group? What changes you're seeing? Who's going to report back to us? Your Bob, your breakout boss. How do you know who's the boss? Got the brightest color shirt. Ready? Go to rooms. So you should have a little rectangle on your screen that's assigning you to a room. Just click on that, and that should put you right in your room. I'll see you back here in a few minutes.
I have a C, but I don't have a breakout room. No one's in there with me.
Okay, yeah, it looks like a lot of people haven't gone yet.
My breakout, it didn't pop up for me to go to a breakout room.
It
Mine
pop
didn't
up?
either. Okay, now it just
I
did.
just did.
Oh, good. Probably somebody helped me out with that. Kim, Amy, Jessica, Wilma, Connie, do you see a blue rectangle that you can click on to go to your room?
I don't at the moment. I think it's because I was the one who opened them up.
Oh, okay.
But I'm able to pop in and out, so I may do that once everyone is-
Okay, thank you. Thanks for opening them up.
No worries. You're so good with that recording button. I always forget. Obviously, you've got skills. Okay, everyone's back.
Let's hear from group 1. Brandis, Christy, Connie, what kinds of things did you guys talk about? Just a quick wrap up.
Okay, our group, we talked about just the social, emotional, and physical, children seeming to be a little bit behind and really not meeting the milestones that they should be meeting at their specific age. And even the parents, we felt like the parents were kind of more stressed. They were kind of, I don't want to say socially awkward, but it is kind of, the parents were kind of like that because no one really knew what was happening. And so, yeah, the parents definitely had changed, and plus the children.
All right. Yeah, I see lots of nodding. Room 2. We have C. Cromarty. Tell me if I said that wrong. Elizabeth and Susan and Tara. Who's your boss? And what
I'm going to
did
be
you
speaking
guys
for
talk
our
about?
group. We had some of the same things with the parents feeling overwhelmed, lack of interactions with peers, the social emotional piece, just how the children just have a lot of feelings and just not knowing how to express themselves, which also affects their language. And we even talked a little bit about fine motor skills, something as simple as how to hold a pair of scissors or cut. And then we also touched on a little bit with home visits, especially during the pandemic. We weren't going into their homes and building that connection, and that's kind of where it starts. So that also we felt had an impact.
Yeah, I've heard teachers say that even not having families bring their child into the classroom, meeting them at the curb, that they feel the loss of that connection. All right, room 3, Norma, Robin, Sheila. What did you guys
Hi.
talk about?
Yes,
Hi.
hi. I'm gonna speak for our group because Robin had on the loud colored shirt, but but she was driving. So I told her that I would speak for our group. We talked about
Thank you.
you're welcome. We talked about lack of language skills in the classrooms, lack of engagement. Norma shared one thing that I didn't think of was that she's a director, and she said that going into the classroom, she's noticing after after all this that the children want to touch more. They are wanting to have that direct touch, and then we're seeing more challenging behaviors in classrooms as well.
That absolutely makes sense. Room 4, Erica, Katrina, Macy, Sarah.
Hi, Katrina. I'm speaking for our group. Sorry, my camera's not on, it's not working. But we were talking about how a lot of socialization skills are suffering. So there's an increased shyness around strangers, and they're really lacking in social skills. And also they've noticed an increased trouble with potty training. Mostly because parents didn't really have that support system to go into potty training as they normally would. Also a real lack in emotional development, along with delayed speech, and also increased screen reliability. So a lot of these kids just don't know how to function without tablets or screens.
Yeah, lots of good points there. And that very thing you just brought up about potty training, I also heard this morning at the school where I'm visiting. So yeah, I think that's another emerging issue. And I think we'll continue to find those. All right, room 5, Elizabeth, Jennifer, Lakeisha, and Teria.
So our group, we discussed like during COVID, some of the parents were actually also trying to study online and complete their degree, which also, as I was explaining as a Head Start teacher, I was trying to do Zooms with the kids, but the parents were busy doing their own college work or school work or whatever. So that interfered with them being able to log onto the Zooms, which kind of held the kids back from learning. So I was saying that it was really hard as a Head Start teacher to teach preschoolers during a Zoom lesson. So we discussed that.
and even the bandwidth at your house to support all those people on Zoom at the same time. Yeah. All right, group 6, Christy, Michelle, is it Rohalyn and Yvonne?
Rogelyn. Is that
Oh,
is that
Rogelyn.
right?
All right,
Okay,
thank you.
Rogelyn.
Tell me
Okay,
if I
so
say it wrong.
it's no
Yes,
problem.
that's you.
Yeah, that's me. And I had the most colorful, so I
Okay.
got the chance. So
Good.
one of the things that's been said a lot of times is we're seeing more children needing speech therapy because they've not been able to see faces. And an increase in aggression, which is part of that social emotional, but also we felt like that a combination of some of that was going on is that we have a lot more new teachers, younger teachers who come not from a child care background. So they don't have the patience or the skills to help children deal with their strong emotions and those kind of things, and a high teacher turnover rate, which we haven't seen in a while. So that contributes, to some of that social emotional, and there's no continuity of care. And it seems like it's really down. That was
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'm seeing that all over. Thank you. Room 7, Deborah, Kiara, Mary, Stacy, and Wilma.
All right, I'm speaking for group 7, and I told them anyone can just chime in if I forgot to say something. But a lot of what's been said is what we were thinking as well, that lack of social and emotional skills that children are, not having. We also talked about, I mentioned that, some of these classrooms, our infant toddler classrooms, were shut down for the lack of not having teachers. So we don't know how many children may have been at home or with someone else. So by the time they enter the child care world, they may not know how to have that communication skills. We were talking about the speech being delayed, the developmental stages, because they may not have been around the other children, self-regulating themselves, how to calm themselves down. And probably, the routines and the transition might have been a problem for some of the children when it comes to knowing what's next, what comes next. Although they're young, we have that schedule, it's nap time. It's time to eat at a certain time, and then one person had mentioned that they heard they don't work directly with the children, but they heard that the children are like 6 months to a year behind just from not even, having that time of being able to be in that environment where they can thrive. So there's that communication skills, social emotional anxiety, not knowing how to self-regulate. So that was some of the things that we mentioned in our group.
Thank you, Mary. Yes, absolutely. And maybe more than 6 months to a year behind. All right. Room 8, Courtney and Natasha, what did you guys talk about?
I'll speak for our group. So I think we have said all the same things, everybody else, but one of the things that Natasha pointed out is in addition to the children and some of these behaviors is also that kind of the capacity of the teachers. And so I know the question was about what we've seen in the children, but that the behaviors that the teachers in general are having a hard time dealing with some of these behaviors, and that they really, we were kind of emphasizing the self-care that they really need to, but they are having the difficulty of how to handle these behaviors too. So while these behaviors are sort of exaggerated, and where it was typical before of the hitting and the kicking and the biting, they're so exaggerated at this point, kind of post-pandemic, that now the teachers are just having such a hard time and aren't as supported as they should be. So we kind of went into a little bit more discussion about that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's contributing to the teacher turnover that we were just talking about.
Yes.
All right. Room 9, Kelly, Kim, Letitia, and Suzanne.
Hi, I'm going to speak for our group, and we definitely echo all the other groups that have spoken so far. Increase in challenging behaviors, probably due to some lack of articulation, increase in speech referrals, definitely this year, and completely teachers, I think, feel overwhelmed just from their experiences through this entire process, but also with the children that are coming in with, a little bit higher need than they have in the past. But we're all just trying to work together and get it figured out.
Excellent. Thank you, Suzanne. All right, room 10, Christina, Laurie, is it Lumisha and Miranda?
Well, Laura, I'm not sure my shirt could be any brighter. I think you were thinking about me when you were deciding how you're going to choose the leader or the spokesperson. But ours, again, very similar to others. We had speech delays were definitely on the rise, low self-regulation skills, unfortunately, too. We thought about families remembering to be social, especially even for first-time parents, that importance of actually getting out and being social for those that were born, children that were born during the pandemic, and how important that is for them and for families to actually get out and not just in isolation at a park, but actually engaging with others and what that's like and how it is important for those young children to see those interactions and to engage in them. And lastly, serving families in new ways and having to be creative and come up with those new strategies and how do we create those resources or what do they look like? All that changed and how everything was navigated differently.
All right, thank you so much. And you're exactly right, all of you. These are exactly the things that research is finding. I was thinking there was one more group, but it looks like that's all we have, 10 rooms, right? Nobody's left out? Excellent. Okay, you have to holler if you are. All right, thank you. So yeah, what you're going to find is the research is going to show already the exact things you were talking about. So there's some storytelling research where researchers went in and listened to the stories children were telling, those play narratives that reveal what children are worried about, what they are playing over and over so that there are themes in their play. And what they found is children are expressing a desire to have their daily life, their normal routines, to be with their friends, to have extended time to play, to be outdoors, and to have authentic information. And this study was done with kids from 0 to 10. So we don't want to give them all the information, but they wanted to know as much as they could what's going on, because honestly, we didn't always know what's going on. But I think it's important that we think about young children, what do they have to say, listening to their wisdom, giving them some agency, and then realize their need for companionship during the pandemic. One of the studies found that a lot of programs closed with 1-day warning. So kids were in their normal routine, suddenly they were out of the routine. And other countries have handled this much differently than the US. In many European countries, if you had young children, that was all you were expected to do. You were given a living income and you were expected, especially during lockdown, to take care of your children. What happened in our country? We were taking care of our young babies, right? Many of us trying to work from home or worried about our work and whether it would be there when lockdown ended. Also having school-age children, trying to get them to do virtual school, and that looked very different even week to week and certainly program to program, and trying to manage all that really stressed everybody out. So let's look at some of those studies. First, I want to talk to you about social emotional development. Many of you mentioned that, so I thought we could start with the way it was defined in some of the studies that I looked at. Social emotional development was defined by Ashton and Barnard as how children learn to initiate and maintain trusting relationships with adults and peers, to understand and express emotions appropriately, to explore and engage with the environment, and to make responsible decisions. Another study defined as developing self-regulation, impulse and emotion control, responsible behavior, planning, and self-reliance. Teachers and caregivers play key roles in helping children develop this emotional competence. Play-based learning provides relevant and meaningful opportunities to learn emotional competence. Play is a tool to build resilience and coping skills, to negotiate, to navigate relationships, and to deal with challenges. Conflict resolution and peer acceptance are practiced through play. Some facilities, as I said, closed for months without any warning for the children, And children suddenly had lost all of these lessons they were getting, but also the opportunity to be a part of a group and to learn all of those skills, all of those language skills, all of those social skills that happen when you're part of a group of children. So the social emotional impact of the pandemic included, there were 1.4 to 1.6 billion children impacted globally by school and program closures. According to the United Nations, children were not the face of the pandemic. You remember, especially initially, we thought, oh, it's not that big a deal for children. They're not getting as sick, but they may be the greatest victims of the pandemic because there were profound effects on their well-being. The impact of loneliness and social isolation. I saw a headline this morning about loneliness in adults, but also it's happening with our children. Loss of routine, contact with friends. I remember my high school student said, I forgot what my friends look like. And so we were able to, call up some families and get kids to go to the park and spread out, but at least see each other's faces because they hadn't seen that in months. Behavior and emotional problems we're seeing more of, as you guys mentioned. This was a study of 506 parents, and they said that the children missed their childcare. They missed having play dates and activities, going to the park. Remember, even parks were shut down for a while when we weren't sure how COVID was spreading. They were missing their friends. Parents were seeing changes in children's personality. Children were becoming more clingy, feeling down, anxious, bored, fearful. Parents felt horrible about the amount of screen time. Someone mentioned worry about, kids wanting to have screens all the time. Well, research has shown, even before the pandemic, that it rewires your brain what you're consuming. So if you're watching these videos where thoughts are coming at you faster than you can process them, your brain actually wires itself to expect that and to cope with all that information. And when that happens, real life becomes very boring. And it's hard to engage with because you're used to having lights and colors and flashing. So we do need to give kids opportunities to be bored and to experience the pace of life, not this faster pace. Part of the time, at least, more of the time than many children are getting. Parents reported children being less happy and more worried. So what does this mean? This study said, as a means of facilitating the natural rhythms of a child's physiology, slow has become the new urgent. We need to slow down our pedagogy. You may see headlines saying, oh, we've got to make up. We've got to make up for lost language. We've got to make up for lost social skills and other academic skills. We've got to stuff information into these children's head. The study says no. What we need to do is slow down. We need slow knowledge characterized by listening to children. Teachers should find the rhythm of the child, to listen deeply to what they're saying, to observe deeply of what's happening, to connect deeply with children by reading slowly, playing slowly, snacking slowly, walking slowly. Almost the opposite of the information we may be hearing, especially that's available publicly. We've got to hurry up and make up for lost time. And that's not true. If we want to meet our children where they are physically, mentally, socially, we need to slow down and help them make up for the trauma that they have been experiencing. So let's look at risk and resilience among caregivers, among the adults. This is a study done by Oxford University Press. This data was collected in April and May of 2020, so in real time during the lockdown. And they found that support systems for caregivers benefit both the adults and the children they care for. No brainer, right? That employment, financial, physical, and mental health supports are needed, and social emotional concerns about children impact and are impacted by caregiver functioning. In the United States, 28% of families experience layoffs. So over a quarter of families experience layoffs. 33%, a third of us, experience income loss. 53% lacked emergency funds. I'm not sure that's not higher, maybe sufficient emergency funds. 35% had difficulty managing childcare, right? In my state, 500 programs closed, mostly family childcare homes, but we lost a lot of programs, especially in rural areas. And then the psychological effects for caregivers. And this was the same as in other pandemics like Ebola. Caregivers experience greater stress than adults who were not caring for children, more burnout, more declines in mental health, inadequate resources and support. And this came from studies in Germany, the United States, and New Zealand. So multiple studies had these same findings. The effects on children. Children had fewer coronavirus-related illnesses, but greater psychological effects than adults. And this has also been the case in other disasters, both natural disasters and mass violence. Children show signs of post-traumatic stress, clinginess, sleep problems, temper tantrums and aggressive behaviors, incontinence, hyperactivity, depressive symptoms, separation anxiety, deviant behaviors, and somatic symptoms. I had to look up somatic symptoms, and those are excessive thoughts and feelings and behaviors that are focused on their physical symptoms. And often those symptoms don't have physical causes. So what we might think of as psychosomatic illness. The effects on children under 5 particularly included the program closures during lockdown, fewer opportunities for socialization. Maybe they didn't have access to virtual programs, or there was difficulty engaging. Makes sense for under 5, difficulty engaging virtually. And the quality and dosage, I like that word, dosage, of those programs varied greatly. Children in poverty were more vulnerable, like in every situation. No matter what happens, it always seems like it's hardest on the children and the families who are barely getting by to begin with. Especially layoffs reduce access to housing and food. And then pre-existing behavior challenges and children with developmental disabilities were most at risk for negative consequences. And this had to do with disrupted therapy services, and again, adults who are trying to cope on so many fronts at the same time. Imagine trying to get speech therapy virtually. The caregiver's mental health. 44% of caregivers expressed significant concerns about having enough money for necessities. 66% were confident of access to well-balanced meals. That means 34% were not. 72% reported increased anxiety. 46% reported increased sadness and depression. 39% reported sleep disruption. 34% reported increased anger. I was talking to a teacher yesterday. They were in a temporary building with no sound absorption, like in a big warehouse that had about 15 classrooms set up. And she said, the other teachers and I know that the sound is getting to us when we start crabbing at each other. And we're like, okay, we just need to go somewhere quiet for a while. Because they were feeling angry at things that normally wouldn't make them angry. 72% of teachers or caregivers were confident in managing their own worries, only 72%. And only 63% were confident in managing the worries and anxieties of the children they cared for. So what helped? That was a lot of bad news. Let's look at the good news. What helped? None of these are going to surprise you either. Eating a balanced diet of healthy food, more time outdoors or even looking outside. Like if you can see Mary's background right now, I find that very calming to see that beautiful outdoor scene. Maybe Hawaii? I don't know, that's gorgeous. Yeah, all right. Time spent on a hobby. Whenever I make time to do a hobby, I just feel this, it's almost like deep breathing. I feel anxiety go out of my body. It's like, oh, I needed a creative outlet. I forgot I needed that, to make time for that. Following a routine, especially when you don't know what to expect, a routine is very comforting. For a lot of the children that we care for or programs serve, having that routine may be the only thing they can depend on in their life. You know, it may be chaotic outside of their childcare program or school. So knowing what to expect and when to expect it can be very comforting. Less time reading COVID-19 news. I did find a study that said teachers and people in the early childhood field are more likely to keep up with it. And that was a positive thing. But I think this is talking about doom scrolling. We don't want to, spend so much time reading and worrying. Building and maintaining close relationships, which is more challenging now. Inside and outside your family. One of our Kaplan reps said he now Zooms with his immediate family, his brothers and sisters and parents. Every Saturday night, they get together and see each other's faces on Zoom, even though they're in different states, which they never did before, which is a positive thing. And then every Wednesday night, the cousins are now getting together. And so he's seeing them a lot more often. In my own family, we're very competitive with our Wordle. We have 3 different generations who compete Wordle every day and text our answers. 86% reported connecting virtually, which can be a positive thing. Okay, now I want you to think about all this research that I just read to you and shared, and we're going to do another breakout, and I want you to think about what resonated with you from this research. It really reiterated a lot of the things you talked about. So just quickly, what made sense, or maybe what surprised you, and then we'll come back together and the bosses report back again. Ready? I'm going to open your rooms. What are you going to talk about? What resonated or even what surprised you? And then Bob's report back. And whoever's in charge, you might want to stop the recording for a few minutes. They got it. They got right in their rooms this time. Room 10. Christina, Laurie, Lamisha, and Miranda. What did you guys, what resonated with you?
Well, we had from our group, they were talking about being able to take time, having kids take time to be bored and to not try to hurry up and catch up with everything. That was kind of a profound statement. The other thing that, I come from a home visiting background, and we had started using virtual visits during our home visits, and kind of there was a time and a place for virtual visits, and family got used to those. So when we went back into the homes, we were able to continue some of those virtual aspects of visits when, going into the home wasn't convenient. Like I have a family that is actually visiting family in Mexico. We've still been able to continue to provide services through our Parents as Teachers program.
Oh, wow.
Virtual visits with this family. And so they've been able to have that maintain that consistency and that contact.
That's wonderful. And I just heard this morning about a group that was going to do an IEP by phone with a family that's visiting Mexico. That's wonderful that that's possible. Thank you. Okay, room 9, Kelly, Letitia, Natasha. And Natasha, I know you just got there.
We just talked about the fact that this all resonated with us just because we were seeing, our first discussion was very similar to the findings that you had and what we're actually seeing. And you also talked about just the need for self-care, and that by labeling it self-care, that sometimes maybe you may not be as inclined to actually adhere to it versus just saying that you need certain things and taking care of yourself.
Well, and it's hard for us to take care of ourselves because we're so busy taking care of other people, right? And giving ourselves permission that we need to be taken care of too. Absolutely. Thank you. Room 7, Deborah, Kiera, Mary, Stacy, and Wilma.
So we spoke about, how we're building that and maintaining those close relationships that resonated with us. At one time we were just all together, and when that COVID news hit us, then there was that point where we just all was in our silos. We went home and not knowing when we were going to come back, thinking it was only going to be just a few weeks or so, but it ended up being much longer than it was. And then, it brought about fear. It almost kind of had me going back to 2020 thinking, oh gosh, I never want to experience that again. So that news, it's like we revisited that for a minute, and we talked about how we, you just in your own world and the unknown, not knowing what it was going to have, the impact that it really made, learning how to do TA, learning Zoom. How do you do the TA, virtually, and connecting with our clients or early care educators, with our families, how did we handle that? So that's what we spoke about.
That's so stressful. Thank you, Mary. Room 6, Chrissy, Michelle, Rogelyn, and Yvonne.
Well, what we talked a little bit about briefly was that resonated the most was that, yes, we need to recognize these issues of concern around mental health. But, now going forward is focusing on what is needed to support our childcare staff and each other, and talking more about that.
Absolutely, because nobody understands our stress except each other. We understand each other, so we need to support each other. Thank you, Chrissy. All right, room 5, Elizabeth, Jennifer, Lakeisha, and Taria.
We discussed that it was important that it stuck out to us that you said to sometimes just take some time to slow down. That's a very important thing, because a lot of times we get so caught up in what we're doing and the families that we're helping and the different situations that sometimes we just need to take a step back and slow down so we can take a deep breath and do better for ourselves and the people we're serving.
Thank you, Lakeisha. Yes. Room 4, Erica, Karina, and Macy. You're telling me to slow down and I'm hurrying up.
That was us. We were also just talking about just slowing down with kids, but also in early childcare settings is maybe instead of the track that we have with kids of just jamming everything down, of just kind of coming up with a whole new track with these kids and kind of catering a little bit more to their needs and really thinking outside of that box and looking at what other countries are doing with their children and kind of bringing that into our teaching style, because we are so against bringing in outside influences into our education system.
I agree, Katrina. NAEYC in the last, not the current revision, but the previous revision of developmentally appropriate practice, they talked about we try to go mile wide and inch deep on our curriculum. And sometimes we need to think about going mile deep and inch wide so that we're covering things in depth, letting kids learn more deeply about something, but not trying to cover everything in the world. And I think that kind of goes with what you're saying, of that slowing down and looking and seeing what other people are doing. All right, finally, room 1, Brandis, is it Carolyn, Christy, Connie, and Kim? What did you guys talk about?
It was my room. We talked about patience, and I love that word, having patience with the children, to get them back where they're supposed to be in the milestones, but also having patience with them, because a lot of the children did fall behind during COVID, and just getting them caught back up to where they need to be, but have patience with them and try not to rush everything, and just kind of do everything moderately. And but I love that word patience, because you don't see that a whole lot in our world today. So and then kind of with everybody else, what everybody else is saying, just just to get them back on track where they need to be.
Absolutely. And I'm a stranger in Maryland this week driving, and I wish people would have patience with me when I
Oh,
mess up.
golly, yes.
Okay, we are almost finished, but my friends at Smart Start said it's okay to go over just a little bit, right? You guys said that? I think I heard that. I just want to wrap up, and there's a little bit I want to share with you. Is that okay? All right. So
Yes.
we need to push the restart button. People talk about the pandemic learning losses, but I've also heard educators say we can't lose what we never had. So yes, the children didn't learn what other children learned by their current ages, but they learned new skills, and they saw us cope in ways that they had never seen before. We can make the future what we want it to be. We can focus on the things that give us energy and try to avoid the things that drain our energy. And remember why. Remember your why. Why did you come to this field? Why do you love your job, your agency, where you work? What do they do that makes a difference? And focus on those things. But real quickly, I want to give you an update on Nelson. So my great nephew, that baby at the beginning, his parents working remotely decided, why don't we move to Denmark? And they did. So the kids are in Danish schools. They're learning Danish by immersion. And my sister-in-law is their grandmother. So she Skypes with them, connects with them virtually. And she said, when she asked Nelson the word for something in Danish, the young preschooler now, he'll say, there's no Danish word for that if he doesn't know the answer. And so his grandmother's like, really? There's no word for bird in Danish? No, they don't have a word for that. But then I also wanted to quickly tell you about Colin, the redhead you see there. Because they're in Denmark, they've been able to take wonderful trips on the weekends. This is them also. They've gone skiing in Switzerland. They've gone to Morocco. And so Rhonda's grandmother said, I'm really envious of you getting to go to all these places. And Colin said, I'm envious of you, Nana, because you don't have to get on a plane all the time. So it's all about perspective. All right, so we talked about those studies about children's storytelling, the social emotional toll, risk and resilience. I will share those with Smart Start, and they can share them with you, or I will also share with you my email, which is here. And if you email me, I'll send you a list of the references from this presentation. All right, so we didn't go much over, just 3 minutes over. I want you to think about, and we don't have to waterfall because we are out of time, but think about a lesson you can take away. Anytime you go to a conference or a session, there really should be something that can be transformational for you. It might be something the presenter says, it might be something someone said to you in a breakout, or just a thought you had during the session, but there should always be something you can take away. And so think about, what is it from today that you can take away? And so that's what I have for you. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for participating. You really made this session. It would not have been as good without you.
Thank you, Dr. Wilhelm. That was a wonderful session. Thank you all for attending. And we will post the materials that Dr. Wilhelm has for us after this session. So again, enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you for coming. Thank you.
All right. And enjoy the rest of your sessions. Thanks for being here.